Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Red Hour, a show I do twice a week, where I throw a little chaos into Star Trek by reviewing a random episode. My name is the Dead Man, if you didn't know, and if you didn't know that, then why are you even here in the first place? Anyway, today's episode is Enterprise, Season 1, Episode 13, Dear Doctor. And it starts off with Dr. Phlox feeding all his little animals in sick bay. And he's just going around feeding the animals, and then he pulls out like a bug. Looks like a grub worm, but it's blue. Feeds it to the animal, and then he eats one, and that's the teaser. It's very short. It's kind of stupid. So Hoshi enters sickbay and brings Phlox a letter from his colleague, who's a human doctor, and they have an exchange program where he's on Denobula, which is Phlox's planet. And basically there's like a montage of him. Well, he listens to the letter and what the doctor has to say, and how that doctor is getting used to the rituals and mating cycles and different things on the Denolia, because they have multiple wives and multiple husbands, and very different from human relationships. And so he replies back to him, and he's just walking around. You hear his reply as he visits different places around the ship, and he's visiting. He goes to engineering, and there's a guy who has like first degree burns, so he applies some burn gel on and helps him out with that. And then Porthos is sick because Archer's been giving him cheese again, which he's not supposed to be having. It's not supposed to have. And then it switches to like movie night on Enterprise, and he's with Ensign Cutler. And I brought her up before. She was an actress that died when she was like from a rare disease. I forget what it was, but she was on like the early first 2 seasons of Enterprise, I think. You see her every once in a while, and she was in the episode of Voyager that made me want to start this show, where she's in a play, like a Greek play. I forget the name of the episode. I should know it because it's the episode that made me want to start this show. Let's see if I can find it on my channel. Of course I can. I have to go to my channel. I should know this, but I don't. Playlists. We don't want to play it, but well, I started off with doing my review of Section 31, and basically it was less of a review and more of like, here's how I would have done it differently type of thing. And here's the episode. Oh no, that's not it. Here it is. It is Muse. God, I should have known that. I don't know why I forgot that because there's an episode called a Voyager called Muse, and then there's an episode of Deep Space Nine called The Muse, and it's easy to get those confused. But anyway, she's in that episode, and she plays the girlfriend of the playwright, and she gets jealous because B'Elanna's there, and he's more infatuated with B'Elanna than her, and basically blows up his spot. But you've seen if you've seen Enterprise, you've seen her. She's pretty cute. I think that she's a decent actress, and had she had lived, I think that she would have been a regular on Enterprise, and probably maybe even a love interest of Phlox, which they hint at it here, and probably would have gone on to do other things. A lot of other stuff, in TV. Anyway, Trip. I don't know what movie they're watching. Maybe somebody out there knows. It's an oldie from the 60s, I think. But Phlox catches Trip crying, and Phlox is explaining how, he doesn't understand how movies could elicit such a responses, and then, stuff like that. So after the movie, Phlox is walking Cutler back to her quarters, and they're talking about, he's like testing her about the respiratory system, or the aortic system, or something about the heart. Wouldn't be respiratory. And she mentions to him that he knows about the system, but not about the human heart. And then she's basically like kind of flirting with him, and then at the end kisses him on the cheek as he leaves. So meanwhile, so the Enterprise has come across a ship that's like set adrift, and it's a pre-warp ship, and there's 2 life signs on there that are faint. So they bring the 2 people on board, and the guy wakes up in sick bay, and they're trying to talk to him, and they can't understand him, and Hoshi is like fiddling with the universal translator and trying to get him to say more things. Eventually he's able to speak, or eventually the translator is able to pick up his language, and basically these people have been they have a disease, and they've been looking for a cure, and they've came in contact with other warp capable species, and trying to see if those people can help them with a cure. And he says they left their home world, and there was 12 million when he left, but the numbers have probably gone up since then. And Archer and T'Pol, so Archer pulls T'Pol to the side and basically is asking him, what do you think about this situation, And she says that, well, they've already came in contact with warp capable civilizations, so they, it's kind of too late, so it's okay to help them out. So he gives Phlox the okay and tells him to, see what you can do. Then Hoshi is talking with Phlox in the mess hall, and they're speaking in his language, and she asks him about Cutler, like, are they dating? and he says that he's not really sure. And then they have a little back and forth over that. So then Archer's like committed to helping these people at this point, and there's like 50 million of them on this planet, and they're in the hospital and they're discussing things with like the lead doctor, and then there's another person there who doesn't speak, that the translator hasn't picked up on their language. So basically it's another species that share the same planet. And Cutler's there helping with the situation. They're trying to find, well, at first they find a way to like deal with the symptoms, but then Phlox is like asking this doctor if they've checked with the other species, because the other species is like immune to this disease. And he asks them if they found any compatibility, or is there anything that they can do to help. And the doctor tells them that they've tried, several, basically tried everything. And then Phlox talks to Paul, who has I guess like something wrong with her tooth. So he acts as a dentist as well. And I guess with their technology, it's different, And he asks to Paul like what she thinks about Cutler, and how he thinks that she's in love with him or whatever. And she says that humans are often, infatuated with new things, and that it could be that that's the case with her, and that, eventually that infatuation would wear off, and tells him to be careful. And then Phlox goes to talk to Archer and tells him that this illness is not genetic, or the illness is genetic, and that this species will be extinct in less than 200 years. So the doctors thinks there could be a cure with the other species. So Archer tells him to try to look for a cure. And they're called, so the ones with the disease are called the Valakians, and they're highly advanced. And then the minks are the other ones. So it's like Neanderthals and humans, who are less advanced. They're more primitive. But they're checking out the minks, and they're taking blood samples and stuff, and one of the minks like indicates that, or he's able to speak English without the universal translator. He's able to just kind of pick it up on his own. So they realize that the minks are more, they're like smarter than they originally thought. And so they're starting to evolve. And then Phlox talks to Cutler about the situation, and how he kind of got this feeling that she was like into him, and she says that she was. And he explains that he has multiple wives, and it's not the same as humans, and that their relationships would be different. And she says that she doesn't want to be another wife, and that she just wants to be friends. And the way it's kind of says to me is that she wants him as like a fuck buddy, but not like a relationship. But so he understands and goes on about his business. And then Archer is visiting the guy that they rescued from the ship. He's visiting him in the hospital, and the guy says, "Look, if we just had warp capability, we could go seek out other species that might be able to help us." And so he's basically asking Archer for help. And then back on the ship, Archer talks to T'Pol about the situation. She says that they've gotten like 29 hails, with people thinking that under the impression that Enterprise had found a cure, but they hadn't. So Archer talks to T'Pol about giving them warp drive, and they basically have this discussion about how the Vulcans, after humans found warp, discovered warp drive, that Vulcans had been around to help them for 90 years and still are on Earth. And Archer says that he kind of understands now how the Vulcans must have felt. But the difference is humans discovered warp drive. We weren't given it, So, and Archer reluctantly is like, it doesn't seem like they're ready. They don't know how to use the technology. They don't know how dangerous it is. Things like that. So it's later on that night. Phlox goes to the mess hall, and Archer's there in the mess hall, and it's just the two of them. And he says something like, "Oh, you couldn't sleep?" And Archer's like, "Yeah, I couldn't sleep either." And they discuss. Archer wants to know if Phlox has gotten any more progress. So before this scene, you see Phlox look into a microscope, and there's like a strand of DNA that kind of changes or something. So Archer's like, "Doctor, the cure. Have you found a cure?" And Phlox says to Archer that even if he did, he doesn't think it's ethical because the minks are in a process of evolution that, and maybe not now, but like thousands of years from now, are going to become the more dominant species on the planet. And Archer is like, "I don't really care. We're talking about now, not what might happen in the future. You're a doctor. You need to do something to help these people and cure them." And Phlox says, "Well, what if the Vulcans or some other species would have came down, to Earth 50,000 years ago and helped out the Neanderthals and not the humans? And, what if that were to happen? And what if that would have happened and your species wouldn't even exist anymore?" And again, Archer's like, "I don't really care. We're talking about made up scenarios that didn't happen. I'm talking about right now." And he's like, "Do you think you can cure them or not?" And Phlox says, "I already found a cure." So the next day, Archer comes to sick bay, and And Flock says, I've got to protest because everything in my belief system tells me to tell you that I think this is unethical and that you should change your mind. And Archer says, I already have changed my mind. I spent the whole night thinking about it. And he says, we didn't come out here to play God. And so he decides to give them the medicine that would help with the symptoms, and says that, hopefully in time you guys will be able to develop a cure. And the guy, says, well, if we had warp drive, we would be better off. Our chances would be better. So then, in the letter, Phlox is telling the other doctor about how he's glad that he trusted Archer to do the right thing, but there was a moment where he almost didn't tell Archer that there was a cure. And then he's kind of feeling like he's had a bad day or a rough week or whatever, and calls up Cutler to join him in the mess hall for a bite to eat. And that's it because he needs a friend. So that's the episode, and I thought I've always liked this one. I liked it when it first aired. I gave it an 8 out of 10 because that's what Star Trek should do and is supposed to do, is talk about, again, moral dilemmas, the human condition. What would you do? Provide two different options. And yes, they picked the option, but or Archer picked an option, but it still allows the audience to think and doesn't tell the audience what to think, because somebody else might think that Archer didn't do the right thing. And Archer should have, if you're a doctor, you take the Hippocratic Oath. Your first thing is to do no harm, and you're supposed to heal people no matter what. And you're not supposed to have an opinion on it one way or another. And so somebody else might think that and say that no, that was not the right thing to do. I'm in the opinion that Archer's right in that they're not there to play God. And that's a tough one. And I'm not sure if what I think was the right play. I mean, my idea was, what if the mink were like relocated to another planet or something, and then they gave the other species the cure, and then they just go their separate ways. I don't know if that's even right too, because that's like, not everybody's gonna want to. That's like the Trail of Tears. That's like relocating the Indians and stuff. I mean, it's. The other thing I forgot to mention is that the mink like the way that they're treated by the other species because they provide them with everything they need. But the soil, he says to Hoshi that the soil there is not very fertile, and then they're not allowed to plant crops in the fertile soil. So a lot of the crew kind of feel like they're being misused or mistreated by the Valakians. So again, it's like the American Indians, they're kind of placed on reservations, and that was the problem that you had, like at Wounded Knees. Like the Sioux were not the type of people, were not farmers, and then they placed them on reservations and made them farm anyway, and that's what led to Wounded Knee, the uprising and the massacre, and because there was two different Wounded Knee massacre, or two different Wounded Knee things. But anyway, events. There was a massacre and then there was a battle. The first one was a battle. The second one was a massacre. I think that was in, 1890? Which is when basically the last big Indian War thing, event that happened before, the census. Before they declared the West like settled. But anyway, I'm looking out in the chat, and it looks like DJ Play Nice is here and Michelle Ferry's here. Hello to both of you. I hope you are enjoying this episode. I don't know if you guys watched Dear Doctor, but I thought it was a great episode. So now we get to the portion of the night. And there wasn't really much any more like philosophical I wanted to say. It's really up to the audience who is watching this episode to decide what the right thing to do is. I think, like I said, Archer wasn't out there to play God, so there's that. But what do you do? So they kind of came to a compromise, I guess. It was like, we'll give them the means to fight off, the symptoms, and then they have to figure it out on their own. So now we get to the portion of the night where fate chooses the next episode. As you can see, nothing has changed. Oh, something did just change. Oh, I must have accidentally pressed it right then and there. Oh, it's TAS, and I'm not doing TAS anyway. So we'll randomize it again. Oh, we got TOS. Finally, I've been wanting to do. I think I've only done like 2 original series episodes. So this one is The Naked Time. It's one of the most famous ones. In TNG, they did The Naked Now, which was basically a repeat, the same episode. Except for in that one, in The Naked Now, Dr. Crusher is like all hot and sweaty and is about to get it on with Picard. So that's season 1, episode 6, The Naked Time. So let's go back out in here, and Michelle Ferry says she really liked this episode too. Yeah, it's a good one. A lot of people, yeah, TOS, right on. A lot of people give Enterprise crap, but I mean, I think there's some good there. Especially, I didn't. So I'm gonna do my review for Strange New Worlds season finale. It was boring. I think I'm probably done with that show, but anyway. Well, folks, that about wraps it up. Oh, Gavin Blackburn just showed up. All right. So, hello, Gavin Blackburn. And so I want to thank DJ Play Nice, Michelle Ferry, and Gavin Blackburn for showing up tonight, and anybody else who's out there lurking or that sees this episode in the future. I want to thank you all. And on that note, good night.